Hey there, it's John with Heroes and Legends. Welcome to another edition of This Week in Magic the Gathering. This week, a lot of our information is going to come from Pro Tour Magic Origins, but we have a couple other tidbits to share as well. So we got a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, first things first, Pro Tour Magic Origins. And our winner of Pro Tour Magic Origins was Joel Larson. So what did we see this weekend? First thing I'll say, I was happy that I saw, or didn't see, I guess. We didn't see any unnecessary drama, rules controversies, goif gates, nothing like that. It was actually a pretty well played, very respectable tournament. Players all carried themselves very professionally, as did the announcers, the commentating team, judges, everybody. So really cool to see. I know last few big events seems like we always have some story that takes the spotlight off the actual event, but this time that didn't happen. So congratulations to Joel Larson, huge win for him. He was a runner-up. I believe it was Pro Tour Gate Crash where he was defeated by Tom Martell. So good for him. Nice to see him make it to the top of the Pro Tour. So let's look at the top 8 brackets real quick and just see who else was there. We had Kentaro Yamamoto, Mike Sigrist, Paul Jackson, Stephen Barrios, Patrick Cox, Matthew Sperling, Joel Larson, and Stephen Neal. So when you look at the top 8 here, one thing that was kind of cool, and we'll look at deck lists in a second, was no one or two decks really took over the tournament. There was a handful of decks that were very strong, and when you got to the top 8 contention, there was a nice mixture of those decks in there. So Standard looked like a very healthy environment. The Magic Origins cards, much like we saw last week at Star City Opens, they kind of helped older decks along. There was maybe one deck that was pretty successful that really was created because of cards that came from Magic Origins solely. The rest, it was more of a supplemental thing. So let's take a look at some of those deck lists and see what we saw at the Pro Tour. First, we'll start off with Kentaro Yamamoto's Abzan Megamorph. So this one is nothing earth-shaking. As a matter of fact, with the exception of, I think, Languish, unless I'm missing something, that I believe was it. Everything else was a previously printed card. So not a new deck that we haven't seen before, but it did very well. And just goes to show you, Abzan and this particular Megamorph version, still a very good deck in today's environment. Now, Stephen Neal's red aggro deck. This deck, and you're going to see in just a moment, very similar, if not exactly the same as Joel Larson's deck. So these red aggro decks basically took advantage, and there actually is one difference now. Stephen's playing Chandra, which I don't believe was in the winning deck list, which we'll take a look at in a few moments. But as you can see, these decks have been supplemented with some new cards. In this case, we get Chandra. There's the big one, of course, is Exquisite Firecraft that kind of made this deck and kind of pushed it over the edge. And the other card that really pushes this deck is Abbot of Carroll Keep. So those two cards really made this deck a thing. 2 copies of it that we saw in the Pro Tour top 8, and there are many copies or similar decks out there in the field. People were expecting Goblin Piledriver, that type of red deck. Didn't really see that. And not to say it wasn't being played at all there, but didn't see a lot of success in cases that it was. So Goblin Piledriver right now anyway hasn't really gotten there, but this is the red deck that really has gotten there. We'll look quickly now at Stephen Barrios' deck. Now this is the deck that was maybe one of the more surprising decks. This was the deck that Team Channel Fireball and Face to Face was on for the most part. And here's what you kind of get from it. Hangerback Walkers, of course, we've known from watching the Star City Games Opens last couple weeks. Huge, huge, huge card. Chief of the Foundry show up in this deck. Here's where it deviates a little bit from some of the Artifacty Thopter Control-y decks that we were seeing in Star City Games. The big card here is actually a couple big cards, but the main one I think is in Soul Artifact. So this was one that fell off a lot of people's radars. This was from M2015. And This deck showed up, and it wasn't just Channel Fireball playing it. There were other teams that had figured this out as well. A little surprising that we didn't see this really at the Star City Games Open, but I guess that's what the Pro Tour is all about, is trying to find twists to give yourself an advantage. And Soul Artifact made this deck incredibly fast and just blisteringly just deadly. Shrapnel Blast is another card that just was huge in this deck. Ghostfire Blades. This is a very different build, even though maybe some of the cards are the same from the blue red or blue white or blue green, or I'm sorry, blue black decks that we saw using these artifacts in the Star City Games Open. So very cool. And this is one of the decks that actually made it to the finals, and we'll see Mike Sigrist's deck in just a moment. So here's Matthew Sperling. Now he played an Abzan Control. This one's a little more classic. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there's much other than the Nisa that is new here. Oh, Languish and Nisa. So other than that, it's kind of what you're used to seeing. Again, Abzan strong. It's there. This is a different type of Abzan, but now it's the second one we've seen in the top 8. Green Red Devotion still a thing. We saw this doing very well at the Star City Games Opens. Continues to do well. Here's a copy of it that made it to the top 8. And again, this is just kind of the same old story, nothing new or shaking here. But there is Green Red Devotion. And here's Patrick Cox Red Aggro. So basically, another copy of Red Aggro. And I think I might have said earlier there were 2. Actually, there were 3 in the top 8. Again, Abbot of the Carol Keep and Exquisite Firecrafter really driving this build. Here's Joel Larson's winning deck. I think basically the same deck list. Again, Abbot of Carol Keep, Exquisite Firecraft. So there it is. So I guess if any deck really was dominant in top 8, I guess it's that one, since there were 3 copies. But really not by much, considering we saw a couple different Abzan builds. We saw Green Red Devotion, and now we saw 2 in Soul Artifacts. This is Mike Sigrist's deck that he took to the finals. And it was a very interesting matchup if you have a chance to watch the finals on YouTube or what have you. This deck could have very well won. These were 2 very fast decks, and it came down to draws. I mean, I think it was the 5th game Mike Sigrist had to mulligan down to 4 cards, I think it was, and you hate to see that. He very, very well could have won. It did go to a 5th and deciding game, so really cool stuff. But again, there's your running up deck list with Soul Artifacts. So very interesting deck list. Rally, I'll just mention briefly, we didn't see it here in the top 8, but Rally the Ancestors decks were there. They didn't do so well, though. They were a little too slow. And not to say some people didn't post some decent results with them, but they were kind of getting run over by these Red Aggro and these Blue-Red and Soul Artifact decks. And they just couldn't do what they needed to do fast enough. Even though they did have a fair amount of success at the Star City Games Opens, they might be kind of falling out of favor now that everyone kind of sees the speed of the format. So yeah, there's your deck lists. So what else went on at the Pro Tour that we need to talk about? First off, let's talk about this was the last Pro Tour of the season, which means we find out who our Player of the Year is and our Rookie of the Year. So a lot of tension around that this weekend. And we'll talk about Player of the Year. Well, let's talk about Rookie of the Year first, then we'll come back to Player of the Year. Rookie of the Year was Justin Cohen, who was the runner-up at Pro Tour Fate Reforged. Everybody remembers him playing Modern Amulet Bloom, and he just got so many points being in the finals of that Pro Tour that no one was going to catch him for Rookie of the Year, basically, unless some rookie came and took this Pro Tour. So he was sort of a shoo-in. He did claim his Rookie of the Year, so congratulations to him. Really great year for him, really great performance, huge breakout performance at Pro Tour Fate Reforged. So having said that, let's look at our Player of the Year. So going into it, Eric Froelich had a pretty big lead. He went in playing the Soul Artifact deck, which is a very, very strong deck, as we saw this weekend. His teammate, of course, was playing the same deck, and here's where it became a nail biter as the days went on. Eric started off not doing so well. I think he was I think he 0-3'd the pot, the draft pot, if I'm not mistaken, and then he lost one of his matches, so he just barely squeaked by to day 2 with a 4-4 record. Day 2, he did great, and he basically really kind of took over, handed with a 12-4 record. Now, Mike Sigrist, playing the same deck, also ended with a 12-4 record. His tiebreakers were better. He just made it into the top 8, and he had to get to the finals to pass Eric for the Player of the Year. So, and Eric Froelich was actually on the coverage team for Sunday, covering the finals, and poor guy had to watch as, and I'm sure bittersweet. I'm sure he's happy for his teammate, but had to watch as Mike Sigrist squeaked by into the top 8 with the same record and the same deck he had, and then won and got to the finals, and of course became Player of the Year. With that also comes the fact that he will be the captain of Team USA for Worlds, and that's another thing I know meant a lot to Eric Froelich. So, Eric was very professional and did a great job. I mean, carrying on with his job in the booth through all that, I'm sure it was very emotional for him. And so, hey, congratulations to both of them. Eric's had an amazing year, coming in second, and he also, which we'll talk about in another moment here, had another huge accolade this weekend. But great year for him, great year for Mike Seacrest, just amazing, all in all. So, really cool to see both of them successful this year, and so there's your races, and that did add for a little bit of tension, especially on Sunday, even more so than maybe even the actual tournament. So, all right. So, having said that, what else was going on there? And let's talk about, since we're talking about Eric Froelich, let's briefly talk about the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame announcements were made for this year's class. So these are the 3 folks that have been elected into the Hall of Fame. It is Willie Adel, Shota Yasuka, and finally Eric Froelich. So congratulations to the 3 of them. Again, there'll be a link to this article. You can read all about their histories, and here's the voting, how it ended up. Eric Froelich with 138 votes, 66.35%. Shota got 130 with 62.50, and Willie got 99 with 47.6. So those are your 3 new members of the Hall of Fame. They'll be elected at Worlds, and awesome stuff. So very cool. You can glance, and I'd encourage you, if you have time, check out the article, glance at the other names on the list. Huge names, a lot of people that will definitely have some future and hopefully make it to the Hall of Fame. Still kind of sad to me that Chris Pikula doesn't have the new amount of pro points needed to be eligible. I'm hoping that he can collect a few more pro points this year and maybe next year be on the ballot. So we'll see. Now, having said that, last thing before we move out of Pro Tour, there's also another pretty cool article on the Wizards of the Coast site that I'll link. There's the top 5 cards of Pro Tour Magic Origins, and just we'll glance at them quickly. Nisa, and these are all the cards we just saw basically for the most part in the builds we looked at. Nantuko Husk, because of the rally deck, even though it didn't really make the top 8. Topin Freeblade, which again saw a lot of play out there in a few different decks, red, white, blue archetypes, even though we didn't really see it in the top 8. Hangerback Walker was just superstar, as we've been seeing in the Star City Games Opens. And then, of course, like we mentioned before, Abbott of the Carroll Keep, Exquisite Firecraft really made the red decks a thing. And so there it is. Definitely check that article out if you have a moment. All right, so where do we go from here? Another thing that is now revealed, now that the season is officially over, is we now know who is going to be playing in the World Championship competition. So we have all 24 of our players. Just want to take a moment to let you know who those were. Of course, we start off with Shanhar, who won the last 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. So he'll be trying to three-peat. Ari Laux, Martin Muller, Antonio Del Moro Leon, Martin Dang, Magnus Lotto, Alexander Hayne, Yoel Larson, Mike Segrist, Eric Froelich, Sam Black, Brad Nelson, Andre Strasky, Li Tien, Yuya Watanabe, Kentaro Yamamoto, Paulo Vito Damaderosa, Thiago Saporito, Seth Manfield, Paul Rietzel, and our last four, Sean McLaren, Steve Rubin, Owen Turtenwald, and Jacob Wilson. So congratulations to all 24 of them. This is one of my favorite competitions to watch every year. Last year they actually recreated Vintage Masters for Magic Online on paper, so they made packs to draft that were the randomly generated packs from Magic Online, and they pulled the cards together and played Vintage Masters, and there was power floating around. So they do some really cool stuff like that. It's kind of like the old Invitationals in a way, with some different kind of odd formats, but they do some really cool different gameplay, and it's really good to see this level of competition kind of all in one room in this real small tournament. It's a lot of fun to watch if you haven't watched it before, so definitely check it out this year. So last thing we'll talk about with Premier Play before we get into just one more story of more casual play. There were a number of announcements this weekend about some changes to Premier Play. There's the whole article here, so definitely check it out. I'll just recap it quickly for you. First thing we'll look at is the PPTQs and RPTQ improvements. So a couple things. We're trying to tighten up the schedule a little bit and try to get them a little bit closer to the Pro Tour that you're qualifying for, so that's kind of cool. They're also allowing tournament organizers to do last-minute PPTQs at the RPTQ, so just kind of if I qualify for an RPTQ and my friends don't, then it's kind of like, well, either I go alone or my friends kind of go and watch me play. Now at least there's a tournament that they might be able to play in and try to qualify for the RPTQ the next day or what have you. So I thought that was pretty cool. And with that, they kind of announced the schedule for the next few Pro Tours and what the when you can expect those Pro Tour qualifiers. Also, in addition to that, they're adding Magic Online Regional PTQ. So if you can't travel to your PTQ, but you qualified, you have the option to do it on Magic Online, which I think is really cool too. So that's really awesome. 2016 World's Magic Cup qualifier dates were announced, and the formats were announced. So you can see here, Standard, Modern, Standard for those. And they have the 3 dates announced at this point. Now here's one that was really interesting to me, and I'm sure this is driven by the Star City Games Open, but they made an announcement about series-style events run by independent organizers. First off, they're going to reward more Plains points. So qualifying tournaments, you'll get a 2-time multiplier, and the finals events will get a 4 times multiplier. But here's the big one. Additionally, if a series is comprised of 20 qualifying events, we will consider awarding a Pro Tour invitation to the winner of the culminating event. So even a chance to get a Pro Tour invite from playing in the Open Series in the future. So they said some of these changes you'll notice immediately, but really look for these next year. So that's exciting news. I think that's, Star City Games, obviously, they run GPs for Wizards and stuff, so I'm sure they have a good relationship. I don't know who else this would affect other than Star City Games. There's probably somebody out there. There are other tournaments out there, obviously, that probably will be affected by this. That's just the one that jumps to mind. Okay, so let's talk about Grand Prix updates. So they released the Grand Prix schedule for the next coming season, and there's 10 in Asia Pacific, 12 in Europe, 26 in North and Latin America. As far as formats go, 5 will be teams, 11 will be limited, 20 will be standard, 9 will be modern, and 3 will be legacy. A couple other kind of interesting changes. They're going to increase prize support. So if you have less than 3,000 players, it's going to be $50,000 in prizes. 3,000 players or more, it's going to be $75,000 in prizes. So very good. We actually did a video on that a while back where we talked about prize support. I think it was in the Goifgate video for GPs just not being very good, especially when you start looking at you're getting these GPs where people are, you're getting thousands of people. So where's that money going? Well, it's going to the organizers. It's not being paid back out. So this is awesome, huge change. Definitely Wizards listening to the community there. Another thing I thought was interesting was GPs that will be happening prior to the Pro Tour will always be limited GPs, so you don't have a situation where pros are going to have to make the decision to kind of show off their deck tech prior to the Pro Tour or not. So I thought that was pretty cool, and and just smart. So also, as far as the schedule goes, there are a few less events this year for GPs, but it was basically due to scheduling conflicts, and I think they want to try to allow people to get out to regional pro tour qualifiers and stuff like that. So they modified their schedule just slightly for that. One other big change is you can lose one more match and still make it into day two. So more players will be able to go over to day two, and just allows more people to play in the GP for longer, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, I always enjoyed the GP atmosphere. I didn't mind losing on day one and playing a lot of side events, but it gives you a better chance to stick in the competition longer and lets you draft in a draft pod the next day. So hey, that's actually pretty cool. 2016 Pro Tour schedule also came out. As you can see here, Pro Tour 1 is going to be in Atlanta. That's your modern one for the year. The rest are standard, similar to this year. And you're going to see Madrid, Spain, Sydney, Australia, and Honolulu, Hawaii again. So there is your Pro Tour information. Again, the 2016 Magic World Cup will also be held in Seattle, Washington during PAX Prime next year. So that was announced, which no surprise since that's where it is this year as well. And here's a quick look at your GPs. So again, I'll leave the link so you can get a better look at this, but very cool. One thing you'll also notice eventually when I get to it here, somewhere down here, what they're doing is, there it is, Netherlands is going to be hosting Worlds next year in 2016. So the GP the week before is going to be in the Netherlands. It's going to be team limited, so it's going to try to encourage some of the teams to come out early and play in a team limited event prior to Worlds. Really cool idea, really like that. So cool stuff. Another thing you're going to see is if a GP, if two GPs or three GPs are happening in the same weekend, they're going to be the same format. So, for example, you see December 3rd through 4th, 2016, there's one in Denver and one in Madrid. They're both standard. So that's going to be kind of how they do that going forward. Sort of inspired by Modern Masters, I guess, that type of style. The one thing I was a little disappointed in seeing, or I guess not seeing, is we saw this huge Modern Masters 2015 event this year, and it was just amazing. And a lot of people that attended it described it like a Magic the Gathering convention. It was kind of like Magic San Diego Comic Con or MegaCon or whatever you want to call it. And I really think Magic needs that. I think they need that on a yearly basis, not a every 2 years basis. Now the question is, how do you make a limited event that huge and put that much hype around it? It's kind of difficult, I know, and maybe they're working on it, trying to figure that out. Every 2 years, Modern Masters comes out, and yeah, that provides a lot of hype. So what do you do that off year? The one year they did Conspiracy, which I thought was really awesome, but they kind of plugged that more of a small offering where it wasn't limited. They had some great cards in there and some really cool reprints, but they weren't necessarily like the crazy sought after things that everybody wanted to get their hands on right now. So Conspiracy was awesome. I really liked it. Maybe with a little bit different marketing, they could have done a bigger event around it, but it was kind of tagged as, a casual thing you play at your local game store with your friends, and I don't know if that's going to quite cut it, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, one type of idea is, quote unquote, you create something like a Legacy Masters, and now obviously you got the restricted list, you're not going to reprint any of those cards or anything, but maybe you just create a set like Modern Masters that feels like a cube, that's draftable, that's really fun, has some really big time reprints in it, that maybe some of them are from Modern, maybe they're older than Modern, but they allow you to supplement maybe your cubes, your commander decks. Legacy players can get their hands on some cards that aren't on the reserve list that they might be able to need. And maybe that's your product. Obviously, you don't call it Legacy Masters because that can't possibly live up to the expectation. You find a new name for it, but maybe that's the concept, that it's just big enough that you reprint some cards that are huge, high-value cards that aren't on the reserve list, and you create another set that has a lot of hype around it, and you limit it like you limit Modern Masters, and you just create that hype train, and then maybe every year you could have a huge event in Vegas and all over the world, and I think Magic needs that. So I hope they figure out how to do that in the future. I think that would be amazing instead of having it happen every 2 years. So anyway, the last thing I want to say about the Pro Tour and Premier events and all that, if you're watching this weekend, you saw the new Mulligan Rule, and looked like it worked well. I really liked it. I mean, it made mulligans a little less punishing. It made you a little more apt to probably mulligan when maybe you were borderline. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I think that's especially good even for new players who don't want to mulligan. So I really liked it. I hope it comes through to all levels of Magic. Aaron Forsythe mentioned that. I think he was asked something along the lines of, is it working? How do you think it's going? And he kind of said, well, it's hard to judge just by one tournament. We really won't know anything until we start getting data on Magic Online. So I guess that alludes to the fact that it's coming to Magic Online. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. If they're going to say, okay, this is the new rule, but it has a stagnant period of time, then we're going to reevaluate, or if they're going to have testing on Magic Online, maybe with test groups, or I don't know. So interesting comments. So I guess it's coming to Magic Online in some way, shape, and form. And if it's coming there, I think it's going to be everywhere soon. I just kind of wish they would just do it. I think it's a good rule, and I think it proved itself well this weekend, and I'd like to see that in your Friday Night Magics in your normal place. So anyway, having said that, one last article to look at, and this is a small bit of news, but it's also a big bit of news, I guess. This is from Blogatog, Mark Rosewater's Blogatog, and basically he made the comment that the Battle for Zendikar pre-release will no longer have seeded packs. So put in the comments below definitely how you feel about that one. I'd be interested to hear. I'll kind of tell you my thoughts on it. So it sounds like, yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of information here, so I'm speculating a little bit. Sounds like to me you're still going to be able to pick a color or a faction. You're still going to get your pre-release box with probably spin down counter and the little trivia and games and stuff in it, and just the extra stuff they give you. And you're just going to get 6 packs of the set, and you're going to build your deck, and there you have it. As far as the promo card goes, it could just be any rare or mythic rare from the set, and it'll just be foil and date stamped. And it sounds like it's playable, unlike the old days where they would just give you one and you couldn't play it, and it just sat there. So you're getting basically 6 packs and 1 extra rare is what you're going to get to build your deck from. So I like it. I thought here's my journey with with the pre-release packs. Return to Ravnica, I really thought it was a cool idea because you were picking your guild. I was like, yeah, I want to pick, Boros or Demir or, I guess those were Gatecrash, but Azorius or Is it, and then again, they did it for Gatecrash, and yeah, it's a cool idea. I really liked it. It allows you to kind of customize your experience, be part of the guild that you enjoy and try to play that. And maybe you play it, maybe you don't, but at least you're set up to play it. And then Dragon's Maze, I thought it worked there too, where again you picked a guild and then you had a surprise guild ally when you got your pack, and then you had cards from basically those 2 guilds that were in your seeded packs. Thought that was a cool idea. It didn't make a lot of sense for me once you got to the core set and then into Theros, because then I felt like, okay, I'm picking a color. All right, green, So, and then of course there was the kind of awkwardness of everyone who picked green, for example, got the same promo card. So people looked at the promo cards and said, this one seems like it's the most powerful and limited. Everyone wanted to be that one color, and then they eventually fixed that by making it more randomized. But you were still picking, I mean, I guess it made a little more sense for me in cons when you're picking wedges. A little less sense for me when you're picking allied colors and dragons, But then, of course, this past core set again was just back to colors again. So I'm not sad to see it go, quite honestly. I think that it was a cool experiment. I liked it a lot in Ravnica, and it just didn't seem like it was... It would be cool to do every once in a while, maybe, if you return to Ravnica again or have another set that makes sense, like Alara, like Return to Alara or something like that. But it doesn't make sense when you're playing a core set. You're playing a normal set that's like probably like Zendikar will be, which would be your 5 colors. So yeah, it is what it is, I guess. I, I like the fact that you don't have a seeded pack to just steer you in a direction. I feel like you actually probably will build better decks if you're not already predisposed to try to go in a certain direction. And as far as the promo goes, I think that's cool. I mean, you could get any mythic or any rare in the set at any time. That's cool. You're getting a bonus rare with a promo date stamp on it. That's pretty neat. Um, I know I kind of miss the old days though when they just gave you a mythic rare and sometimes gave you like one of the best cards in the set. Now I'm sure that probably hurt sales because I think back to Rise of the Eldrazi, they gave out Emrakul. I ended up getting 2 Emrakuls from that pre-release, and I still have them today. I play with them. I put them in my modern deck. I've never in my life opened another Emrakul in either Rise of the Eldrazi, Modern Masters, but I never at the same time felt like I needed more than 2, so I was never encouraged to go out and buy more packs to get an Emrakul because I had them. So it probably wasn't a good financial idea for them, but I really thought it was cool. You got a set even before Mythics. They gave you a rare that was really one of the centerpiece rares of the set, and then when Mythics came along, you got things like a Johnny and Evercool, and it was just really cool and made you really want to go to the pre-release. I think one of the issues with the pre-release now is, I mean, they're a lot smaller, which is good and bad. A lot of people do like that, but at the same time, they're a week later than they used to be, so it's kind of like, okay, if I can't make it to the pre-release, well, I can just go buy the cards on Friday. It doesn't feel as urgent, like I need to go out there and get it. Now, when it was 2 weeks early, I felt like, wow, I want to really see these cards and play with them. I don't want to wait 2 weeks, but I can wait 5, 6, 7 days and be okay with that. The other thing that's a little different, of course, is the promo cards themselves. I mean, there were promo cards that made you want to get out of bed and go to the pre-release. Now I never really feel that way. And now that they're randomized, especially because they're randomized, so I could get just a junk rare. So anyway, take it for what it's worth. I'd like to hear your thoughts on pre-releases, definitely in the comments. Do you like the change? Do you not like the change? What was your favorite, I guess, era of pre-releases? Was it the old, there was one pre-release in the world, like Ice Age? Was it the big regional ones that they used to do during like the Lorwyn time and Time Spiral time? Was it the more localized game store ones that we see now? So hey, anyway, that is This Week in Magic for this week. Thanks for watching. As always, please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. If you're still looking for quality Magic the Gathering videos, click on one of these annotations. And if you hadn't had a chance yet to subscribe, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the breaking MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, crazy product openings, or gameplay videos on Heroes and Legends MTG. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.